And welcome back to yet another episode of On the Grid Podcast, Season 4, Episode 13. This is the Japanese Grand Prix review. I'm your host, Adrian. Joining me, as per usual, is Ethan Evans. Ethan, a little bit of an early one. I won't beat around the bush. I did miss it. I did go out the night before. So I was in bed and I did actually miss it. I've not watched it properly. But how did you find the race? What did you make of it? That sort of stuff.
Yeah, I gotta say it was quite a dull race. It's typical though, isn't it? The first, how many races do we watch Max Verstappen win? And then the one he doesn't win, a lot of people in sort of Europe and the UK miss because it's at 4 a.m. I watched this one and I can't say it was the most interesting race I've watched.
I did catch the highlights. Thank God for F1 TV and having the Racing 30 feature. There was a couple of good overtakes, Yuki Tsunoda being one of them, into the center S's, which were some very good, neat moves. But let's hop into qualifying Q1. The five that got knocked out: Lance Stroll, Pierre Gasly, Kevin Magnussen, Logan Sargent, and Zhou Guanyu. Zhou Guanyu, Logan Sargent, and Pierre Gasly are, I think, the only three drivers that have not made it out of Q1 this season so far. Let's talk about Pierre. I mean, 17th in the end, another step closer to Q2, but Alpine are in dire need of something to kind of kickstart their season, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. You always hear the rumors in pre-season about, oh, this team's not very good, this team is very good, but you never know how much to attribute to it and how much is a bit, you know, how much of it is speculation. That Alpine car is awful. It really is. I think, but what's worrying is that, Esteban Ocon is beating Pierre Gasly comfortably. He's beaten him. I think the race in Australia is the only session that Pierre Gasly's actually beaten Ocon in. Um, so that's a real concern for Ocon for Gasly, sorry, that he's being beaten by his teammate because everybody thinks of those two drivers as on very equal footing. Um, so it's not the best look for Pierre. I'm sure it's just a matter of time until he sorts it out. But hopefully for them, they can bring some upgrades very soon.
And a team that did bring upgrades, in P16, Lance Stroll, Aston Martin bought upgrades, and Lance Stroll has clearly not acclimatized himself to the upgrades very well. We saw Fernando Alonso run very well, getting to Q3, and ultimately finishing in P5 in qualifying, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But Lance Stroll, a little bit of a worry, a little bit of a wobble.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's a typical Lance Stroll, isn't it? I'm going to rename 10th spot as the Lance Stroll giveaway, because at this rate, you've got those top five teams who are just so far clear of everyone that the only way you can get 10th is when Lance Stroll inevitably puts in a poor performance. And, this isn't the first time we've said this. We've given his praise this season because there's been a couple of occasions where he's put in a good shift, he's put in a good race. However, on this occasion, it was not one of those. For a track where Aston Martin actually looked quite strong, I thought Fernando Alonso was very good. And yeah, it's not good enough from Lance Stroll. He needs to pick it up. Otherwise, you know, there is rumours that Aston Martin might look to replace him because, I know these circulate every year, but with how much it's costing them in terms of prize money and championship standings money, they'd be right to bring in someone like a Yuki Tsunoda, Carlos Sainz. There's plenty of good drivers on the market for them. Why not?
I mean, there's one contract that there's been signed whilst we're recording this an hour prior, but we're gonna leave that contract signing until next episode where we talk about all the news and round up before the Chinese Grand Prix. Let's touch upon one final driver. It's definitely not the bottom two of Logan Sargent and Zhou Guanyu who have not been out of Q1 this season so far. It's Kevin Magnussen, the first time that he's been knocked out in Q1 this season. Just a poor performance, lack of know-how around the track, poor lap. What do you put it down to? Because he's been in Q2 every single time so far this season.
Yeah, I think it's just he didn't like lap up together. There wasn't a massive amount in it. I think as far as I remember, it was only sort of a couple of tenths, which it's just getting on the throttle a little bit too early and having to adjust, or slightly losing the car mid corner. So it's nothing major. I think it's testament to Haas that this is the first time a car's been knocked out in well, second time a car's been knocked out in Q1, first time for Kevin Magnussen. And I think it's a testament to everything they've done this season. We expected them to be last, and they've proven us wrong.
On to Q2 now, and the bottom five consisted of Daniel Ricciardo, who finally hooked up a decent lap to qualify 11th, Nico Hulkenberg, Valtteri Bottas, Alexander Albon, and Esteban Ocon. We touched upon Alpine, so let's leave them be for a little while. I think they're a wounded animal at the moment. Alexander Albon, 14th place, obviously out qualifying his teammate once more. Do you think Alex could have expected a little bit more, especially looking at the three drivers ahead of him, Valtteri Bottas, Nico Hulkenberg, and Daniel Ricciardo? Do you think that maybe um, somewhere on the cusp of Q3 was on the cards for Alex Albon?
Yeah, well, he was 3 tenths off it, so um, it. But I think you just got from this point of view, you got to look at the three drivers in front of him and say, they've done a good job. Daniel Ricciardo obviously had no running whatsoever on Friday. Iwasa took his seat for FP1, being Japanese. I think it was nice for him to get that opportunity. Is in front of his home fans, and then FP2 was a washout. About six cars put laps in. And then, so I think Daniel Ricciardo done a brilliant job to get so close to Yuki Tsunoda, given his struggles this season. Nico Hulkenberg continues to impress. He's been a bit of a um, qualifying, master over this season and a bit. He's been at Haas, and then Valtteri Bottas put in a brilliant shift and was very unlucky that he's at the team he is, because I thought it was a very good performance from him. So I think you could look at it from Albon, maybe not putting in the performance you would hope, but I think you've got to give credit to three drivers in front of him.
And let's give credit where credit's due to Valtteri Bottas, 13th, for a Sauber team who are also a bit of a wounded animal, especially with Zhou Guanyu qualifying 20th. What do you think Sauber need to maybe salvage their early season woes and kind of kick on and make Q2 kind of a regular occurrence? Because we're usually seeing them on the brink of Q2, down there with the two Alpines and maybe one of the Haas's, and maybe Logan Sargent as well. Let's add him into the mix. But what do you think they need to kind of battle the Red Bull, the Red Bulls, the V Carbs and the Haas's in the Q for a place in Q2?
I don't know about a place for Q2, because I think the drivers have done a decent job this season. I know Guan Yu Zhou was knocked out again in Q1, but he crashed in FP1, and then obviously, as we said, FP2 was a washout, so he didn't get any running again on the Friday. And he had limited running in practice, so that may have affected him. But for in terms of their battling for points, I think they need some new pit stop equipment, from the sounds of it, some new wheel nuts, because that's been their biggest letdown. We saw it again on Sunday, that the reason that Valtteri Bottas in particular wasn't able to fight for those lower points positions was because of a better pit stop, but still 2 seconds slower than a competitive stop time.
Into Q3, and obviously on pole position was Max Verstappen, with Sergio Perez completing a Red Bull 1-2. Lando Norris in third with his ex-teammate Carlos Sainz in fourth. Alonso lined up in fifth with Oscar Piastri. Seventh and eighth was occupied by Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc. Ninth and 10th, George Russell and Yuki Tsunoda. I'm not going to pose any questions about the drivers. I'll pose this simple question to you. Do you think Was there any surprises for you at all in that Q3 session? I don't think it was much of a surprise seeing the two Red Bulls one and two, knowing their dominance over one lap, etc. And maybe even it was a bit of a surprise seeing Yuki Tsunoda sneak into the top 10. But what do you think? What was the biggest surprise package in Q3 for you?
Well, I think the biggest surprise package was that was a little bit of a letdown. I think it was Charles Leclerc. I know there was about a tenth between fourth and eighth, but Sainz is in fourth, lining up on the second row of the grid. Leclerc's in eighth, so that would be the biggest surprise for me because how many times we say Charles Leclerc is the qualifying master. To look at the number of pole positions he's had, and he's not really ever had the quickest car. So Charles Leclerc's one lap pace is exceptional. So it was a bit of a shock to see him down in eighth whilst his teammate was up in fourth, despite it being such a small margin.
And on to our average driver ratings, our ratings for the Japanese Grand Prix. I keep on trying to say Chinese Grand Prix, but that's in a week's time. Japanese Grand Prix. Let's begin with our pole position man, our race winner, Max Verstappen, 10 out of 10. I don't think we can say much more.
Yeah, I that's exactly what I put. 10 out of 10 is quite an easy one, really. First to first, and never looked in doubt. He's hit back very well.
On to Sergio Perez, P2 to P2. It's yet another Red Bull 1-2. I think that's the third Red Bull 1-2 out of four races. It's actually scary. Could we see the number of 1-2 finishes smashed? Could we see the record smashed? I don't know. Um, I've given Sergio pretty much near enough a perfect rating, but I've actually settled with a 9. I'm settling with a 9 because uh, obviously, yet again, he's a long way off Max Verstappen. And to be fair, from what I saw during the race highlights that I watched, especially during the first stint, it was a little bit of a struggle for him. But during the second stint, he kind of crawled it back a little bit. So I'll settle with a 9 out of 10.
Yeah, again, completely agree. I think it might have been slightly different race for him had he, found that extra half a tenth on Verstappen because he was very close in qualifying. And that's something we've not been able to say a whole lot. But he was very comfortable in P2. Maybe didn't have the pace. He was battling with sort of like the Norris and Sainz for that first and second stint, but then he just pulled away using that superior pace. So yeah, I'm sure he'll be disappointed he couldn't bring the fight to Verstappen. But all he's done is strengthen his case for that Red Bull seat in 2025. 3 second place finishes from the first 4 races.
On to Carlos Sainz, Chile, whatever you want to call him. P4 to P3. I think it's another comfortable 9 out of 10 for Carlos Sainz. He was very good from what I saw, and it's another podium finish. I think you can't underestimate these podium finishes because it's bound to be two of the Red Bulls occupying first and second from what we've seen so far. And there's at least 4, 5, 6 drivers all vying for that final podium place. And Carlos Sainz did it by qualifying P4. Obviously got the jump on Lando Norris and stuck to it. So yeah, it's another comfortable 9 out of 10 for Carlos Sainz.
Yeah, again, we're agreeing every time so far. I've also got 9 out of 10. He was very good performance. Put in some good overtakes as well. I think that should be mentioned because I don't think it was the optimal strategies in terms of the laps he stopped on necessarily. Although maybe he actually did have a good strategy because he had the fresher tyres come the end of the race to make those overtakes. But another good performance from Carlos Sainz. You really just cannot say anything bad about him at this moment in time. 3 podium finishes from his 3 races. And like you said, podiums are a hard thing to come by this season because Verstappen's always on the podium. Perez will be most of the time unless he has an off weekend like he did last time out in Australia. But so it's really the 2 Ferraris that are fighting for that last podium position. And every single time so far, Carlos Sainz has come out on top when he's raced against Charles Leclerc this season. Great performance, 9 out of 10.
On to Charles Leclerc, as you say, from P8 to P4, driver of the day, made up 4 places. But I'm going with an 8. It was a very hard race for Charles Leclerc, especially starting from P8, because his qualifying run was a bit here and there, and obviously he finished 8th in the end. But he made up 4 places. Made I want to say he was on the one stop from a restart, and made that work a treat. And yeah, it was. I mean, for for Ferrari especially, it's all about minimizing the gap to Red Bull, and finishing third and fourth is the best way of minimizing that gap. So it's an 8 out of 10. Driver of the day. Regardless, it was a very good performance from Shaw.
I've gone one higher. I've gone for a 9 out of 10. I thought the strategy was executed fantastically from Charles Leclerc. He's not had a disappointing qualifying. Like I said, he was only a 10th off Sainz, but he was 4 places lower. And we've seen that the best executed strategies can go wrong by starting a couple of places lower than you maybe would have hoped. But he coped very well with it. He made the one stop work, and he made the one stop work a hell of a lot better than the Mercedes did, who were also on that, or actually had to convert to a 2 stop, which ruined any chances of a decent points finish because the tyres went off. Who knows? But a great effort from them, and it's about as much as Charles Leclerc could have hoped for. I don't think he was ever really going to beat Carlos Sainz, given the better strategy. The 2 stop was the optimal strategy, but he made that 1 stop work brilliantly and held off Lando Norris quite comfortably.
Yeah, I think he finished around 5 or 7 seconds behind Carlos Sainz in the end, and a few seconds up the road from Lando Norris, who we talk about now. Finished P5, qualified P3. Fantastic qualifying session. I don't think I can give him more than Charles Leclerc, but I'm gonna go with what we've averaged out. So we've averaged an 8.5 for Charles Leclerc. So I'm gonna stick with it. I'm gonna stick with an 8 for Lando Norris. Purely on the basis of he was there or thereabouts on the tails of the 2 Ferraris. He battled well with Sergio Perez as well. But he just wasn't able to hold on to that podium place. But nevertheless, it was a good finish from the McLaren driver, and an 8 out of 10 from me.
Yeah, I think I've just been a little bit nicer here as well. I've given him a 9 out of 10. I could see it both ways. It was borderline for me, but I went for a 9 because, again, I went for the same as Leclerc because I think the Ferrari is a quicker car, so that's why I've done that. But I thought he maximised the performance really. It's obviously disappointing to lose 4th place to Leclerc and not be able to really battle him. But I don't think the McLaren's not as quick as the Ferrari. So the Red Bull's clearly the quickest car. Ferrari's not too far behind, but there is a gap between Red Bull first, Ferrari second, and then McLaren third at the minute. There is a decent sized gap between each one of those. So to finish 4th would be a bit of an ask. So I've gone for a 9 out of 10 for Lando Norris.
9 out of 10. Okay. On to Fernando Alonso, who finishes P6 after qualifying P5. I think from what I saw, he wasn't very. I wouldn't say he was completely anonymous. But I don't think I saw much of Fernando Alonso throughout that race at all. If I saw him, it was only a glimpse of him. And I mean, for an Aston Martin team that have got upgrades, and to finish ahead of George Russell and Oscar Piastri, it's a good enough performance for me. And I've also settled for an 8 here. I've got 8 all rounds here. I don't know why, but I've settled with 8 all rounds. And yeah, I think Aston Martin, obviously out of them teams, Ferrari, Mercedes, and McLaren. I wouldn't say they're fully on the back foot, but they're probably, well, them and Mercedes are probably the weaker the weaker two out of those four teams. And to finish P6 and beat the McLaren of Piastri and the two Mercedes drivers is very good. So I've settled with an 8.
Yeah, I've gone for the same. I've gone for an 8. I thought it was a good performance from Alonso, but it was vintage Alonso, I think. But he didn't have the pace. I don't think that Aston Martin's quite synced up yet. I think they're still working out some of their teething issues with this car. So the fact he was able to hold off Piastri in a quicker McLaren, you have to say, and then hold off the two McLaren Mercedes even, it's a great performance. And I think Alonso continues to impress. He's obviously very happy at Aston Martin. So you got to say, what can you say? He's doing a very good job there, and it's an 8 out of 10 quite comfortably for Fernando Alonso.
On to George Russell, who made a penultimate lap overtake on Oscar Piastri to steal seventh place from the Australian driver. It's a 7 from me. I think Mercedes are very much on the back foot, especially with Aston Martin making upgrades. And that reflected on the qualifying and I think the race performance as well. It's obviously fortunate that Oscar Piastri did make that mistake. And George Russell was able to use DRS to get by down the start finish straight to claim seventh. But you've got to be there to gain the places, and he was there to do so. But for me, it was a 7.
Yeah, I think this is the most 7 out of 10 performance you can get really from George Russell. It was a good race. He's clearly the quicker of the two Mercedes at this current moment in time. He started off the season well, which was needed after a disappointing 2023. I don't know why Mercedes picked both of their drivers at the end for the two stop because they weren't losing a great deal of time to Alonso and Piastri, and the new tyres didn't work at all. They didn't gain at the rate they needed to. So I don't know what the harm was in at least splitting the strategy, keeping one of them out. But Mercedes are not the team that they used to be. So this is a difficult grade to give, but 7 out of 10 for George. Good performance.
Let's point out he did make 2 places from his qualifying place. So that's always a positive. Go Mercedes. On to Oscar Piastri, who qualified in P6 and finished in P8. Um, just for his, I think for his, I wouldn't say naivety, but he saw the move from George the lap before coming it down into the chicane. He had to take evasive action as George ran him a little bit wide. But then I would say a moment of immaturity. I wouldn't say immaturity, less knowledge. Yeah, maybe we'll go with that. Bumps it down to a 6 for me, I think. He ran a very solid race throughout, but I think it was just that key overtake that George Russell executed on him that kind of bumps the grade down for me. Um, you may think that I'm harsh on that one, but I think if it wasn't for that error, it's like I say, where George finished in seventh, it's a 7 out of 10. But I think for that little moment, bumps it down to a 6.
Yeah, I've also gone for a 6 out of 10. I think it's a tiny error. It's a very small error, but also the fact that Piastri didn't really challenge Alonso once he got. I think he was left out a little bit longer in that first stint, and that allowed Alonso to do the undercut. Obviously, they preferred Norris because he was the lead driver in those circumstances, and then gave Alonso the opportunity to undercut, which was very powerful. And then Piastri was almost sort of stuck because Alonso is a very, very difficult driver to overtake, and Piastri just didn't have the outright pace to do so, or the lap time differential. There wasn't a big enough swing to do so. So 6 out of 10. Unfortunate mistake, cost him a couple of points at the end there, but he'll live and he'll learn. This is only his 25th race, 26th race in Formula One. He's got at least a couple hundred more in him.
On to 7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton, who finished down in ninth. who is screaming down the radio early on, change the strategy. As clearly he didn't fancy the one stop, and he went on to the two stop, and it all went into the bin for Mercedes. Qualified seventh, finished ninth. It's a sad sight to see. Seeing especially in Q2 that he was third. Then seeing in Q3 that he finished seventh, and he wasn't able to keep the place, dropped down two places. The thing is, it's another 6 out of 10 performance. It's a very, very average bog standard performance.
Yeah, I completely agree. And this is where my point goes back to why did they not split the strategy? At worst, Hamilton stays out on those set of mediums and he finishes ninth at worst. So I don't know what the harm is in keeping him out. So he would have been P6. He would have been in sixth after Russell came in. I think Russell was the lead car, so he probably gets the right to make that decision because the two stop probably was slightly quicker. But you're never going to get two cars through Alonso and Piastri when they're sort of in a DR, which would create a DRS train, as it did. So I don't know what the harm is for leaving Lewis Hamilton out because at worst he's going to get as many points as he did. But he's got 10 points after four races, and it's a disappointing start. What's worrying is that despite qualifying ahead of Russell, he had to let him through because he had no pace whatsoever. So he played the team game, let Russell through, and that was kind of his race written from that point onwards. He was before this race 15th in our 1 to 10 driver ratings, and you can see why it's not been a good start to the season for him.
A rating, Ethan?
6 out of 10.
Okay. On to Yuki Tsunoda, home favourite Yuki Tsunoda, who qualified 10th, finished 10th, got a point for his home nation. It's an 8 out of 10. It's a happy story ending. Uh, I mean, he was bogged down at the start. Obviously with that incident involving Daniel Ricciardo and Alexander Albon, which we'll talk a little bit about later. But obviously he was a little bit compromised, but he came through, battling performance, made those overtakes on Lance Stroll and Kevin Magnussen, I believe it was, into the center S's, and just put a fantastic display on for the Japanese crowd. It's an 8 out of 10 for me. It's more points for Yuki Tsunoda and it's more points for VCAR.
Yeah, I've seen some people be giving Yuki Tsunoda a 10 out of 10 for that performance. I thought it was a good display, but it wasn't anything exceptional like Australia when he's put it P7. He has got his pit crew to thank because when you had that 5 car brawl in the pit lane, which I wish we could have seen live. I don't know why we didn't, because obviously it's for the irrelevant places according to the F1 TV direction. But yeah, it was a very good performance. He's got his pick, as I said, he's got his pit crew to thank, who it gained him 2 places, I think it was. And then it was always whoever came out in front of that gaggle of cars was going to be able to go on and get 10th place. So a solid point for Yuki Tsunoda. Like I've said many times already this season, there are not going to be many points on offer for the bottom 5 teams. So any point you can, any chance you can to score points is going to be important. And he's made the most of that. A good effort.
Rating? You've forgotten it again.
I said 8 out of 10.
Oh, you said 8. Okay. All right. On to Nico Hulkenberg, qualified in P12, finished in P11. I'm torn between a 6 and a 7, because he was obviously in that gaggle of cars. Yuki Tsunoda himself, Lance Stroll, Kevin Magnussen, Valtteri Bottas as well. He was in that gaggle of cars. You know what? I'll be nice. I'll give him a 7. He was on the brink of a points. Qualified into Q2 and obviously on the brink of Q3 once again. Made up 1 place and obviously was as close as he could get to the points finishes. So I'll settle with a 7.
Yeah, I think we're agreeing on most of these. I've also gone for a 7 out of 10. I think he was unlucky on the second restart after that safety car. No, after that red flag, sorry, on lap 1. Because I think he got into anti-stall, so he lost a lot of positions and was almost running at the back. But he recovered, put in a great performance. I think The strategy again from Haas was very good. And, the two Haas's continuing to impress. They didn't score any points this weekend, but they're right on the cusp, and nobody had them with a chance at the start of the season. And you think none of the top five teams, none of their drivers retired, and Nico Hulkenberg and Kevin Magnussen are 11th and 13th respectively. So this can only be positives. And Haas haven't brought any upgrades yet. I think they're the one of two or three teams that haven't brought updates. I think they're coming from I think it's either Miami or Imola or somewhere like that. It's in a couple of races' time. So that can only be looking up. And, Au Komatsu does, I butchered that pronunciation, I'm sure, but he continues to impress and leading the team in the right direction.
We don't care if we butchered the pronunciation. It's okay. It's on the Grid Podcast. Sometimes we do butcher pronunciations, but it's fine. On to Lance Stroll, who we won't butcher the name of. He was obviously another one of them drivers in that gaggle. But we talked about it. If Lance Stroll has an off day, somebody else gets the points. Usually, he should get into the points, and he didn't this time. So I'm just sending it directly smack bang in the middle, 5 out of 10. I'm probably even being nice, but he did make up 4 places. He wasn't far away from the points, and he can only take what he can take. But the only thing is, he did have upgrades in that car, and that's the only worrying thing for Aston Martin.
Like I said, 10th place is the Lance Stroll giveaway position for me, because you got the rest of the 9 other drivers in those top five teams getting in the points, and then 10th place is like a lottery, isn't it? So it's very generous of Lance Stroll. We got a couple of drivers in on the act, Mercedes and Verstappen on it in Australia. But they returned to their points positions. They weren't feeling too generous, obviously. So I've gone for a 3 out of 10 because he's got knocked out in Q1, which is unacceptable for the fifth quickest car, at least. So you said he's made up 4 positions. The drivers that started ahead of him, who he finished above. So Ricciardo and Albon, who started 11th and 14th, so they have both retired. And then Bottas and Ocon. That Alpine is a tractor, and stake F1 team cannot do a pit stop under 8 seconds. So in my books, it's still a poor performance. I don't care that he's made it. He's only finished a couple of places off the points. He's actually on that last stint being on the soft tyre. He's been on the soft tyre. He was in 11th as well, but he couldn't close 6 or 7 seconds on Yuki Tsunoda, and he's actually fell behind Nico Hulkenberg, who was on the hards for his last stint. So that is why I've gone for a 3 out of 10. You can call me harsh, but at the end of the day, we've given Lance Stroll his praise this season. This is Lance Stroll's 4 grades this season are 8, 1, 8, 4. And if that doesn't summarize Lance Stroll, I don't know what does.
Okay. Let's move on to a lighter hearted topic. Let's talk about Kevin Magnussen. Qualified 18th, finished 13th. I think I gave his teammate a 7, and I think I'm going to stick with a 7 as well for Kevin Magnussen. Call me whatever, but I'm jumping on the hype train, and I don't even care because choo choo. We are off onto the Gene Haas hype train. I don't care. The 2 Haas's have performed very, very well so far this season. And yes, okay, he has made 5 places. Daniel Ricciardo being 1, Alex Albon being another, Bottas being another, Ocon being another, and Gasly being another. Okay, those 5 drivers there are probably not even worth talking about making up places. But he's still within that gaggle of cars that are fighting for points. And like we say, points are going to be hard to come by. And with Haas obviously being probably the least funded team in Formula One, they're going to take whatever they can, whatever positives they can. And a P11 and P13 finish is not obviously a P9 and P10 from the week before. But it's still a good performance. So I'll settle. You know what? Fine. Okay, I won't settle with a 7. I'll settle with a 6. I'll settle with a 6 out of 10.
Yeah, I've gone for a 5. It's slightly lower than Nico Hulkenberg because he's finished lower. He had a disappointing qualifying, obviously getting knocked out in Q1. But again, this is testament to the fact that, Kevin Magnussen finishing 13th. I've given him a 5, you've given him a 6. So that's sort of testament, because that would have been sort of an 8 out of 10 last season. So yeah, they've made good strides this season, as we've said, and they continue to impress. I think that they're heading in the right direction. Not to be for Kevin Magnussen today. No points on offer for either one of them, but they have done a very good job this season so far, and it's looking up. It's looking up for them.
On to P14 man Valtteri Bottas. Yeah, I've said it. I've said it like Daniel Ricciardo said it, because why not? Why the heck not? Finishing P14, dropped down a place from where he started. Um, if I've given Kevin Magnussen a 6, I don't think I can give Valtteri Bottas the same. So I'm gonna give him a 5 out of 10. But for Valtteri Bottas and for Kick Sauber, it's potentially the start of something good. It's only one race. It's looking on the up for Japan, and maybe for China it just completely falls flat on its face, and they both get knocked out in Q1 once again. Um, but I think it was a decent performance from Valtteri Bottas. I don't think he can complain too much, especially with how Sauber has been performing so far this season. But yeah, I've settled with a 5 out of 10.
I've gone for a 6 out of 10, slightly higher, because when those 5 cars pitted, I think Valtteri Bottas was either at the front or second in that queue. And because of the pit stop issues at stake, he's come out last, I think, or second to last. I think Logan Sargent was behind him. But it was always crucial. Whoever came out in front of that would be the one fighting for the points position, and that was Yuki Tsunoda. So Bottas has lost a couple of positions, and he's finished 14th. So you take a couple of positions, he's sort of 11th or 12th. So he may have been able to fight Tsunoda for that point, but I thought it was actually a good performance from Bottas. So I'm thinking of upgrading it to a 7. You know what? I will upgrade it to a 7. So good effort from Valtteri, I thought, and just unlucky that Stake don't seem to have a clue.
Yeah, they don't seem to have a clue. At least we get to have a funny review when we talk about our predictions next week. Um, let's move on to the two Alpines of Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly. Esteban finished in 15th, Pierre Gasly in 16th. They were fortunate to kind of keep those places as Logan Sargent went off a track in Logan Sargent fashion and had to finish plumb last. I'm going to, well, I mean, I don't think I can give Esteban Ocon more than Valtteri Bottas. So I'll settle with a 5 here. Um, Purely on the basis I don't think I could give him more than Valtteri Bottas. Pierre Gasly, I mean, it's another poor performance. So I'll go with a 4 for Pierre Gasly.
Yeah, I've also gone for a 5 out of 10 for Ocon. It's not looking good when you're a driver that's won a race and you're celebrating getting into Q2. So it it's disappointing for Ocon and Gasly that they are two good drivers, but I think their race was pretty much run after that contact at the second restart, I think it was, after the red flag. So yeah, it was disappointing because Ocon actually qualified decent, 15th, and then you got 2 cars in front of him that's crashed. So that automatically just elevates him up to 13th. So it's unfortunate that he couldn't keep that position or look to make moves further forward. But like I said, these are two very, very good drivers, and they're absolutely able to do nothing, and they deserve to be fighting for high points positions. So 5 out of 10 for Ocon. I've gone slightly low for Gasly. I've gone for a 4 out of 10 because I thought Ocon was the quicker of the two Alpines all weekend, as he's been all season, and that is the concerning thing for Pierre Gasly.
Logan Sargent, the weary case of Logan Sargent once again. Um, what can this man do right? It doesn't look like he can do much right at the moment. Australia, he had his car stolen from him. Last weekend in Japan, he made a mistake that made him finish last. What can he do right? What can he do to put his season back on track? I don't know. But for me, it's a three.
For Logan Sargent, I've gone for a 4 out of 10. Again, someone with very, very limited running on Friday, which was of his own accord. But Albon bins it, and then he gets to hijack Logan Sargent's car. Logan Sargent bins it, and he has to put up with it. I thought what was really, really bad was the fact that Albon kept Logan Sargent's chassis for Japan, and Logan Sargent got the repaired one. So basically, the one stuck together with plasters and sellotape. So you got a feel for Logan Sargent, but I think at the end of the day, at this current moment in time, you got a feel for the Williams sort of technical crew because they're having to rebuild the car every single week. They had to do it after Australia, and they've done a great job to get the car in one piece. They had to do it after FP1 to Logan Sargent's car, which was held together by sellotape. And they're having to do it again for Alex Albon's car, the only chassis that was actually in good condition. They're now having to do it for China next week. And there is no sight of a new chassis. So it's tough going for those Williams mechanics at this moment in time. You do have to feel for them.
Maybe they've got enough sticky tape to kind of glue it back together, or maybe Gorilla Glue. That could work for a chassis. Let's move on to our three retirees: Zhou Guanyu, Daniel Ricciardo, and Alex Albon. Let's start off with the two drivers who had a bit of an incident on the opening lap. Let's start off by looking at that incident. Daniel Ricciardo, Alex Albon. What did you make of it? I think it was a racing incident. Daniel was getting squeezed by, I believe, I want to say it was one of the Aston Martins. I think it was Lance Stroll down his inside. And then kind of Alex Albon was squeezed onto the grass, and the two kind of went off and into the tyre barrier. What did you make of the incident? Pure racing incident?
Yeah, it's a lap one incident if ever I've seen one. No driver was at fault, I don't think. Um, just disappointing for both of those drivers that their lap is off by third corner. Um, so I gone 4 out of 10s for both. I thought Daniel Ricciardo actually he'd done well considering he got no ring on the Friday, and that wasn't his fault. It was just unfortunate that FP2 was a washout after missing FP1. Maybe he should be paying more attention, but Lance Stroll is on his inside in going into that turn three. And knowing Lance Stroll, he could just shove it up the inside and not care about who's there. So Daniel Ricciardo's obviously watching that mirror. He can't look in two places at the same time, unless he's cross-eyed. So, he can't be looking at both the mirrors at the same time to see to see get a Stroll and to see Albon. So it's just unfortunate, but maybe Albon could back out, but it's a racing incident, is it? There's going to be no grid drops or anything like that, and there shouldn't be either.
Ratings for the pair?
4 out of 10. I said that, didn't I?
For both.
Yeah, for both, yeah.
Okay. I'll also settle with a 4 out of 10 for the two drivers. Zhou Guanyu, our final retiree, P20 to retirement with a gearbox issue. I don't know what I can say. If I've given Logan Sargent a 3, I don't think I can give Guanyu Zhou more than a 3. So you know what? I'll stick with the same. I'll settle with a 3 out of 10.
I've gone for a 4 out of 10, purely on the basis that it wasn't his fault that he retired. It's a pretty weak reason, but it's a gearbox issue. And I don't think he was having too bad a race. I think he made up some positions from the restart after that red flag, but he wasn't having a great race like he has in the past, and has got nothing to show for it. He was having an okay race and had nothing to show for it. So 4 out of 10 for me, but not anything remarkable.
And that rounds off our Japanese Grand Prix review on the Grid Podcast Season 4, Episode 13. We'll be back next week looking ahead to the Chinese Grand Prix, reviewing a little bit of paddock gossip. And like I say, looking forward to the Chinese Grand Prix, which returns for the first time in forever. Thank you, Ethan, for joining me. Thank you for everyone for listening and engaging into our podcast. Like I said, we'll be back next week to preview the Chinese Grand Prix. In the meantime, we'll see you then. Goodbye.